Hey guys, Scott here. Today we're going to go over the perks from the All Things Wicked chapter featuring the Unknown, which is some whatever the hell this thing is, and Sable, the new survivor, who I actually quite like. I usually don't care about survivor appearances, but she's kind of my thing. She has this whole, like, I'm so done with this game vibe that I really like about her. So let's go over the perks. As always, I do the perks for one video, and then I play the PTB, and then I give my impressions on the killer after I've actually had some experience with it. So first off, we have Unbound. Basically what this does, whenever you hit a survivor, sort of like Dissolution, the perk will activate for 30 seconds. During that time, if you vault a window, you gain 5% haste for 10 seconds. So this can be really useful in those types of scenarios when you hit a survivor that takes a vault at the same time. It's always the worst time to hit a survivor because normally, if you hit a survivor that's in the open, you can move towards them as you're wiping your blade, albeit at a slower rate, but you're still progressing towards them so you lose less distance. If you hit them as they're vaulting, you just have to sit there and wait for your cooldown, and then you vault, and then you start chasing. So in that scenario, this will help you make up that distance a lot better. And even in not involving that scenario, if you hit a survivor, they run in a straight line, they're going to gain, 17, 18 seconds of distance, which means you have like 12 seconds of duration left on this perk. Even if you have 1 second left on this perk, as soon as you make that vault, then you get 10 seconds of haste. So you can make it last pretty long. And that combined with like Bamboozle, man, you're going to be cutting off a lot of distance on a lot of these chases. So I think Unbound is actually a very, very solid perk, especially combined with things like Bamboozle, Superior Anatomy, things that boost your vault speed even more. Survivors will really not be able to gain that much distance from normally very, very safe vaults. So yeah, I think that's actually a pretty solid perk. Next, Unforeseen. When you perform the break action, I'll just simplify this. This is the perk Dark Devotion, but for generators. So Dark Devotion, when you hit your Obsession, your Terroridius gets attached to that survivor and you become undetectable for the duration. It's the same duration, but this has a 30-second cooldown as opposed to Dark Devotion, which I'm not sure actually even has a cooldown. But the upside is this is way easier to activate than Dark Devotion. For Dark Devotion, the Obsession needs to lose a health state in some way. And you can't always guarantee that you're going to be able to find the Obsession, but you can always guarantee you're going to find a generator to kick. So this is way easier to activate. You can combine this with a lot of other perks too that involve gen kicks and things like that. So I think this is a much more usable version of Dark Devotion. And although it does have a cooldown, its effect is still pretty nice. So I think that's a very solid perk, very good for killers like Bubba that rely on stealth to get very quick downs. So Unforeseen, I think, is actually very solid as well. So far, we've got two pretty good perks. I've also noticed an untheme with the name of the perks as well, which is kind of cool. When a survivor misses a healing or repair skill check, gain 3 tokens up to 30. This is the perk Undone. Now, whenever you kick a generator, you consume all those tokens and you destroy the generator for however many tokens that you had. So if you had 25 stacks, then you remove 25% of the generator and then it's blocked for 25 seconds. Now, the requirement for this is survivors missing healing skill checks or repair skill checks, which, does happen occasionally, but at higher skill levels, it's pretty uncommon you'll get this perk fully charged, really at any point, by default. However, if you have a build or a killer that can modify skill checks in some way, or they're running the perk, deadline or something like that, anything that makes skill checks harder, I think will make this perk have way more value. So obviously, Doctor by default will benefit immensely. This is like the Doctor perk. But really, if you throw Unnerving Presence on anybody, the chance of missing skill checks goes up pretty significantly. And I do think you'll be able to get maybe 2 full 30% kicks per match, which is decent because you've also got 30 seconds of gen blocking on it too. This is a perk that by itself, in my opinion, will not work super well. But if you build around it to synergize, then I think it actually can be pretty good because a 30% removal of progress is huge. It's just the requirement to get there is pretty big. However, there's no like AoE requirement to these skill checks. There's nothing listed here, which means if there's a Meg on the other side of the map missing a skill check, you still get your tokens for it. So that's actually kind of useful, and the average solo queue player is pretty bad. So this is going to be extremely strong in low levels, and in high levels, it'll be okay if you build around it. So overall, none of these perks are bad. I'd argue these two are very solid, and this conditionally is good. But I think Killer actually came on top with the perks for this whole chapter. The Survivor ones are definitely not nearly as good. They're interesting, though. I'll give them that. We have a lot of interesting things going on here, but they're not as good. So the first one is a new class of perk called an Invocation. So this is something that survivors have to channel, kind of like it's a spell. It's a very long cast time. It's 2 minutes. However, other survivors can help you with this cast time. So This has to be done in the basement, though, which means you have to manually walk to the basement and begin casting a spell, pretty much. So, like, the concept of that is really cool. I love the concept of it. I just think the effect here probably is not enough to warrant how long it takes to do in the downside. So, once you've channeled this for 2 minutes, each survivor that helps you increases the speed by 50%. So, if 2 people help you, you do it in 1 minute rather than 2 minutes. If they have an invocation perk, though, each survivor increases it by 100%. So, I'm thinking a meta could be 2 survivors with this perk run down to the basement. They activate it in 60 seconds while one guy's getting chased and one guy's doing gens. The time efficiency-wise, when performed at the start of the match, is actually very in favor of using this perk. The downside, obviously, is that the person that starts it gets, no mither for the rest of the match and they can't heal or anything. But this perk has to be done at the start of the match, which means if killers are aware of it, they're going to start looking in the basement and get free downs every time. So you got to be really careful about this and maybe even delay it a little bit. But it's also the little mind game of wasting the killer's time if you're not doing it. So that can also be kind of useful. Like I said, the time investment for this perk, though, it only works if you do it at the start. If you do this at the end of the game when it's only benefiting 3 generators, you're not really doing much here. It's when it's benefiting 7 generators that it's actually doing a ton of work. That is a lot of charges on a lot of generators, and math-wise, it's actually beneficial to use this if someone's helping you with that. But, like I said, the downside of being permanently injured after you do it, and the downside of having to do this in the basement is extremely dangerous, and, in my opinion, is not worth the risk currently. It's definitely cool because it reminds me of how Texas Chainsaw Massacre makes Survivor gameplay fun by having different ways to complete objectives, and this is certainly a different way. This is instead of trying to open, the electric gates in Texas Chainsaw, it's trying to do the fuse box exit or something. It's doing a different thing to progress the game. And I actually really like that. That's kind of cool. I just think they would need to tinker with it a bit, maybe take it a bit less time to cast, or make survivors increase the speed even more, or maybe make it give, 20 charges per gen or something. I feel like it's not quite worth the risk at the moment, but I love the concept behind it. So with a bit of tweaking, I really like the idea behind invocations. It's an entirely separate gameplay mechanic that can heavily benefit survivors if it goes their way or completely screw them over, and I think that's neat. But let's tinker with this a bit more because I don't think it's worth using right now. Strength and Shadows. When in the basement, this perk activates, unlocks Strength and Shadows, which allows you to heal without a mech kit at 60% normal healing speed. So this is pretty much twice as fast as Self-Care. Shut up, Sable. But it's... I don't know. It's risky, but it's also situational depending on where you are. When you go to use Self-Care, you don't just stand in the middle of nowhere. You go somewhere, safe, right? And surprisingly, the basement is a pretty safe place as long as the killer is not nearby, because it's pretty rare that the killer is just going to go, I'm going to go out of my way to go into the shack, down the stairs, and just search the basement. It's a waste of time to be doing that unless you really suspect someone's in there. So the basement surprisingly is safer than you would think, and being able to heal at Self-Care speeds, but basically twice as fast, you can combine that with botany knowledge, and suddenly you're healing faster than you would even with a medkit with nothing, and you can do that unlimited amount of time. So I could see that being situationally useful on maps that have a very central basement, like Wrecker's Yard, for example. Oh man, this perk is actually really good. But if you're on a map that has a shack that's just off in a corner and it's big, Disturbed Board or something like that, definitely less useful, because you're going to have to run a pretty long distance to even get to the shack. So situationally useful. The Self-Care is actually surprisingly decent, but yeah, it really is map dependent on where that shack is. So it's a mid for me. Wicked. This perk starts with 1 token up to a maximum of 5. For each token, you recover from Mangled status effect 20% faster. For each 15 seconds spent in the basement, you gain 1 token. When you're cursed, you heal 10% faster. This perk is just bad. There's no redeeming factors to it whatsoever. Basically, you can spend over a minute in the basement to recover from Mangled 30 seconds faster if it's 60 seconds. It's not 100% reduction in the time that you're mangled. It's the speed at which you recover. So 90 seconds becomes 45 seconds, 60 becomes 30. It's not 60 to 0. And you heal 10% faster, which is basically nothing. And you have to sit in the basement AFK for a minute. This perk is unusably bad. That's terrible. So Survivor definitely did not get as many good perks. I think this has a really interesting basis. I would love for them to develop this more. Very situationally useful, absolute dog shit. So those are the perks for the new chapter, All Things Wicked. And just in a bit here, I'm going to be going playing the PTB. and seeing out the killer and giving you my thoughts on that tomorrow once I've got some more information and experience with it. But that's it. Thanks for watching.